the first to know Nsem-Pii TV.
The incessant attack on the new patriotic party by the ruling government shall see through the use of national security to intimidate and harass various appointees under the Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo's administration. Into Bank of Ghana governor, the Tono of a former finance minister, Yura Ken Oforiatta, the Tono, Edidimwa, and the National Intelligence Bureau, NIB, and so take over. Sitting member of parliament for Asin South, Reverend Ntim Fojwo, afe na TSC, Adenta Kumi, Nenenamua, Baya, afe na Iyoko, and so take over. Iyoko Dianso, chairman wun to me, Yehunui, Nansia, the ransacking of SML, or office, afe na the office of the special prosecutor, and so Eden Wajim, just say, Kwa na koso, and it goes on unabated. Every National Communication Authority, led by the Communications Minister, the Honorable Sam George, the Ekra no abetomu the Esinkuri. Almost all MPP stations, they've been earmarked for closure. And 62 other radio stations, 62, and I repeat, 62 radio stations, and a National Communications Authority, Chirima. Yan suspend the operations. Yan to tuning in them. Na kata no damanim. It is dated the 12th of June 2025. Or say, the National Communications Authority has directed non-compliant FM broadcasting stations to immediately suspend operations on their respective frequencies for various infractions. The enforcement action has become necessary due to persistent violations of regulatory requirements, specifically Regulations 54 and 56 of the Electronic Communications Regulations 2011 LI 1991, and the conditions of their FM broadcasting authorizations. This action follows a directive issued by the Minister for Communications, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel Nate George, mandating the NCA to enforce applicable sanctions on stations found to be in violation of the regulations in the recent audit conducted by the NCA to ensure full compliance with licensing and operational requirements in the broadcasting sector. Following this directive, the NCA has commenced enforcement of regulatory sanctions against defaulting entities identified in the frequency audit report in phases. The categorization of infractions under the first phase is as follows. 1. Phase 1. 28 radio stations operating with expired authorizations. Some of these stations were ordered by the NCA in 2024 to cease broadcasting, but have persisted in the illegality. Now, South 28 year Nsem George say, or more operating with expired authorizations. And you know, in 2024, the National Communication Authority earmarked these radio stations to say, or more authorization and krata or more the expire. Or no Sam George, together with some NDC MPs, sorry, General Marashebe, and I will play all those audios for you. Me boss audio no, ya was sorry, General Marashebe, say, penny, am to 2 days radio stations. Now, a deliberate attempt by the NPP government under His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo to sabotage press freedom. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama Nakasa Kansan Semnibi, Misa audio no Hamabodi Achel. Until 2024. Radio stations here, that time kwana nye 28, na just 4. Ya, NCA dem, ASA, and krata omodi operating no, authorization krata omodi operating na S5, enti no, ya nsha omo no omo operations in CZ, ya omo sorry gina, ene die, 4 no, omo de mako 24, na beka na 28, omo say, yem close down these radio stations. Metuaso. Almost say this represents violation of Section 2, Clause 4 of the Electronic Communications Act 2008, Act 775 into 2018. Phase 2, 14 FM stations that were issued notices of revocation for failure to set up within 2 years from the date of the authorizations, but subsequently requested for inspection, but the process has not been completed due to various lapses they have to rectify, but are still on air. These stations are in violation of Regulations 54 of the Electronic Communications Regulations 2011 LI 1991. Into phase 1 near 28 radio stations are operating with expired authorization. Phase 2 near 14 radio stations are, according to Sam George, Omama notices of revocation, Esan say, Oma fail to set up within 2 years from their date of authorization. Ya, NCA are requested for inspection. Then so basically, Omo yomo konabra. And in phase 2. This are 24 no beka 28 no sorry, ebeka 14 no one. Aya 42. And phase 3 no, 13 FM stations. Ya, Omo apply for authorization to continue operating and have been issued provisional authorization, but they have not settled the provisional authorization fee in full and hence do not have the valid authorization to continue operating. Yeah, and also according to Sam George, a representative violation of Section 2, Clause 4 of the Electronic Communications Act 2008, Act 775. According to the Honorable Sam George, 13 FM stations here, Omo apply for authorization. Ya Omo operate on provisional authorization. But some provisional authorization Omo jina so credit operating. According to Sam George, provisional authorization fees Omo tia in full. Ya ma Omo akwenya say Ombe operate. Ebe operate provisionally. And here for the 13. And now, apart from them, no, almost phase 4, and no, you 7 radio stations. Now, I say these 7 radio stations have not paid their provisional authorization fees, but final authorization is they've paid, their provisional authorization fees, but final authorization is yet to be issued and have not fulfilled the requirement of Regulation 54 of the Electronic Communications Regulations 2011 LI 1991. Into phase 1, 28 radio stations. They are operating with expired authorization. Phase 2, 14 radio stations. Notice of revocation for failure to set up after 2 years. Phase 3, 13 radio stations. Apply for authorization. Operating on provisional authorization, but provisional authorization fees, and phase 4, 7 radio stations. I want to provisional authorization every year. But the issue final authorization from our Omo to fulfill a requirement for operating. The opening in Abomwa a total of 62 radio stations. And the Honorable Sam George Chirima, you include it down. Or to also say, these stations currently do not hold valid broadcasting authorizations or do not have a certificate of compliance to commence operation and may only resume operations once all regulatory infractions have been addressed and rectified. While the National Communications Authority acknowledges the vital role radio stations play in national development, it is imperative that all authorization holders strictly adhere to the regulatory requirements and conditions of the authorizations. Consequently, failure to comply with this directive shall constitute an affront to the prescribed conditions for FM broadcasting with grave consequences for the authorizations. We wish to assure the general public that the NCA remains dedicated to maintaining order in the broadcasting sector. We urge all authorization holders to fully comply with regulatory requirements to help promote an orderly industry. Signed, Honorable Samuel Nate George, Minister for Communication, Digital Innovation. To the Honorable Sam George, and the Sasha Katayasi, say radio stations Mako Ediosiam 62. Yanto tuning for various reasons was cited. He said, me were audio of this same Sam George in Parliament vehemently opposing the closure of just 4 radio stations then by the MPP's administration under His Excellency Donald Akufo-Addo. And I me one audio of the man penyini ye ne washe no kutupa His Excellency John Dramani Mahama ya wono so kasa say na Nado Danko Akufo-Addo His Excellency oppose press freedom enuti and I was sanctioning the closure of some radio stations and they o mobile abamu die 62 more and you see him. Now answer na meba audio no dia kire mo no citynewsroom.com kire mo a omohwehwemu adedi say 10 of those radio stations radio stations are belonging to some MPP groups. Almost 30 Asase Radio 99.5 say eka ho won to me 95.9 Accra eka ho won to me 97.1 Kumasi eka ho and other affiliate won to me stations spread across this country. This is according to citynewsroom.com. The out of the 62 Chairman won to me nkwa wo mu bears 7. Gabi wachre da akon wo mu bears 2 and other MPP gurus. The interesting times ahead. Very, very interesting times ahead. Going forward, how do I be panning out from this official communique from the National Communications Authority? So back to the 2 audios. May they some so nothing come over. May they account.
I put it on record that the NCA failed to come before this August House in 2015 to approve their schedule of penalties, and that the schedule of penalties as used by the NCA in imposing this charge did not come before this August House of Parliament. And as such, the NCA is carrying out and perpetuating an illegality which this House must stop because we are versed with upholding the 1992 Constitution. Right, Honorable Speaker,
I want to understand you. Which one is NCA applying without coming to this House?
The schedule of penalties that they are using to impose the fines on the houses, on the media houses.
Which is a schedule to what?
Is a schedule of penalties, the schedule of fees.
A schedule is offering to either an ally or an act. So
this schedule was gazetted. This schedule was gazetted on the 25th of April 2015 without coming before this August House. Any fees and charges must be approved by this House. Article 174 of the Constitution is clear on that.
Fellow Ghanaians, today we celebrate Press Freedom Day. Freedom of the press should not only be marked, but celebrated and cherished as a vital and fundamental ingredient of our democracy. Without freedom of the press, we would all be silent. We wouldn't be free citizens, but mere subjects controlled by whoever happens to be in power. Freedom of the press is not a given. We should always remember that, and especially now, when the COVID-19 pandemic tempts some governments around the world to want to curtail the liberties of their citizens. Just as the press performs a civic service to all of us, we also have a civic duty towards the press, namely, to always defend and be ready to fight for the freedom of the press. According to Reporters Without Borders, during my tenure as President of Ghana, we became the country with the highest levels of press freedom in Africa. At the time, we were ranked number 1 out of 54 countries in Africa. We also placed 23rd on the global ranking among 180 countries. 3.5 years later, we have slumped 7 places on the global ranking and lost the number 1 spot in Africa to Namibia and Cape Verde. We've unfortunately lost this priceless status that made all of us very proud. This should worry us, not only as journalists and media owners, but all of us, as citizens and as Ghanaians. As I said, when the freedom of the press is curtailed, democracy suffers. And all other human rights that anchor our dignity as human beings are eroded. Without freedom, our dignity is trampled. This is why we need a free press as much as we need fresh air to breathe. So let us all protect the freedom of the press. Let us condemn the killing of journalists like Ahmed Swale, as well as the harassment of Manasseh Azuri and Edward Adeti. Let us rise up and speak against the dictatorial withdrawal of radio frequencies and closure of radio stations by the government of Nana Akufo-Addo. Let us remind and demand of government to stop paying lip service to the Right of Information Act. Let's encourage, cherish, and always expand the frontiers of freedom of the press in this digital world.
Enu bia no mode ye ba omia edes hwe unim say wo gude we dem no dey fi the same area yenum ye ho wo constituency metimi abobbo police station executives bebre abobbo we yenim party unim say wo constituencies ni mu a omo a efritete no mo wo afa bi no omo aguso o abawo wo dey opa ko hwe
obepe reason not to support
obepe reason not to support the person that the majority of the party are supporting. Ode opa he ko police station bi ala ne nkrofo no omo no mo support Bawumia even though ala nko ukọ constituency level omo eti sa nkrofo na omo chicheche omo de fefa he o on free party na party ni nyana sumdwi obetinim no watete party ni sa the same people.
I see
the same people.
But Dr. Bawumia sure say nyame ya adom no ye public pronouncement say ano ohwe no so bekwa obetime nya the support a unyaye in the previous primaries and answer no ababe face even the general election.
The election bia unique. Election bia strong. Elections mienu bia enye pe. Enti Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia offer election bia serious. That is why till date he remains one of the most hard-working politicians in this country when it comes to campaigning. Elections be a strong. And they obi jira chance say we need 2024 elections in Bawumia ya there. But obi a waga na hebi adi dance say yen victory in 2016 and 2020 Bawumia Juma contribute major in our victory. Enti Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia there empendudu obi a obi take decision say obi run elections no. You can be rest assured say we'll be deploy the arsenals in to make sure that we win the elections. And in Ghanaian victory, it's not about 100,000, 70,000, 900,000 votes. It is about winning. And whatever it says that has to give him the win, he will do it. Yenukroma, and then this for winning general elections with barely 47,000. 2008, Yenukroma.
Yes.
Omo
winning.
Yeah, swearing in. Even though it was 47,000, yeah, swearing in.
Yes, swearing in.
Now that don't go for the baby winning 2016 1 million votes. Yes, yeah, unprecedented. In fact, nobody even imagined say a bit to miss BM. Yes. Yeah, swearing in.
In fact, if you crack a send this year,
yes. Yeah, swearing in.
Yes, swearing in.
Yeah, can say this baby 32 years opposition.
Yes.
2020, go for the D 500,000 votes. Yeah, swearing in.
Yes, swearing in.
John Mahama, His Excellency, EBD, your friend is saying. With over 2 million votes, yes, when in.
Also,
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia there, like I've told you, on ye body ahuju elections bia obekono, or the nibi bia ne arsenals in the beko. Enti membrane do ena yebe baby a grown ankasa eda.
I see. All right. Enti yene miracles den kono be wie o nhyamu bia say oko minimum or any other issue a person address say government to say any other issue a person
can I do issues in you know the kind aban action implementation of the wicked doomsday levy or person de be they will doomsday levy ne ba ebema petrol boy thing and the 40-50% better gallon be also
yes
e beto so a say taxi driver will use to be 10 gallons a day no one spend I'll be spending by 45 cedis a month buying every day. Every day. 45 cedis. say in a month or you do 25 days about 25 times 45 then say bosumi bia taxi driver na truck driver use 10 gallons a day no obetua 1125 cedis
obey susu ama
amaban
okay
so I just say sa 1125 you drivers you omo form bom ho omo de bema yen e ma yetua they are going to pass it on to us to pay. And once they pass it on, unim say Ghana ha dollar doesn't determine prices. Ewo abubulushi
debi
and makola
debi.
Adi determine prices of abubulushi and makola and malata market. A full price.
Yes.
Opa, my dollar and yet $1 to $1. And some man can in a bunch of bo. And sa brody bo. And sa tomatoes bo. Nemu my full price and say embra $1 to friend say per gallon. Banchi bo be bafem.
Okay.
Body boy from but a cost ra omo de beka ho enti yesro mo omo ano maka chen se o ma ya ma dollar ya bafem kakra ema ye nyina ye ni age ema petrol price yi omo de 14 cedis ba 12 cedis ye nya age se wo anhwe mate so 2 cedis enti e de ni je kakra be ba afa ya abosi o kanfo e hwe nim se niam omo di kan toye no e beksa na nkomo de bia ba beka ho no na nka no ba o matete so ama ye no makofa 4 cedis 50 pesos aba. What it means is that the next price window for fuel, no, all your marketing company said they can't catch and somebody wants it in the Babacam. And our GPL to so catch and says, South Canada almost on the prices. Clearly, no, Ghana near my boy already, no, cement price 50 January payment 45 cedis in our Babacam. Cement price 45 cedis. 45 cedis in our Babacam cement price. Iron rod born nam so cement no kwase sia opebi kra tokra wunya iron rod born nam ewiem ho baby blocks and blocks 5 inches kakakra do 10 cedis blocks 5 inches so what just here tomatoes and near tom mienu 10 cedis ana omo company no and tomatoes back 10 cedis bucket no and then nam ebi 25 cedis and no ton 150 cedis
you knew a pebble so
baby so what just here unya mekokra na wato obi say this form say o Ghana ni Ghana yeye niam abo abafam niam ba na abafam a normally nam glamour stores Laboni East Legon is Sphintex sa shops na ye ton sofa ba ko $70,000 $60,000 no e no mo di example man na ye meko ye nyadoa ye tomatoes ye njene ni ade ne de omo nwie no ho what you say
last time me hu ayi inflation basket near my drive prices no na kramanam eshimu a driving na me say
apple any berry enti ye nkasa ye near my ye di no ye we yo oh enti misra omo ye sra ban sa dum so living tie omo yin free o ya nso mo say minim de enti for ba be man dum so ba menti ase
incompetence
menti ase so mo ba ya enti Nana Kufada Tiheya, Yanko Bisan said, Dear Nana, we 8 years, no, in spite of all these challenges, no, Nakani Ejinaso.